ESL in the U.S. and Wisconsin by Cassie Crum, Jessie Burrow, and Kayla Hunt. This graph is showing the top 10 spoken languages in ELL students' homes. This is a graph of all of the U.S., and it is referring to limited English proficient students ages 5 to 18 that are currently enrolled in school. This was done in 2009. LEP students are those who reported speaking English less than very well. As you can see, the majority of ELL students speak Spanish at 73.1%. Other languages are the next top percent at 10.1%, and I just want to point out that Hmong is 1.1%. ELL students in the U.S. And this slide will take us to the MPI, which is the National Center of Immigration Integration Policy website. On this website, there's a graph at the bottom, and it's tracking English language learner numbers that are shared by state. On this map, it shows the United States as a whole, and it's going to show each state individually. And the categories that it shows, or the numbers that it shows, is children in immigrant families as percentage of all children under 18, number of English language learners, and English language learner share of U.S. public school enrollment. For example, I'll talk about Wisconsin, so you just take the cursor and highlight over it. The number of children in immigrant families under age 18 is 114,165. Children in immigrant families as percentage of all children under 18 is 9.1%. And the number of English language learners is 47,593. And the ELL share is 5.4. I would just want to compare this to California, which is the biggest state, and children in immigrant families under age 18 is 4,393,233. Children in immigrant families as percentage of all children under 18 is 49.6%. And number of English language learners is 1,526,036, and the ELL share is 24.3. I also want to compare this to a state that I found was kind of small with ELL students in it, and that is Mississippi. Children in immigrant families under age 18 is 22,918. Children in immigrant families as percentage of all children under 18 is 3.2%. The number of English language learners is 5,428, and the ELL share is 1.1. Lau vs. Nichols. This was a civil rights case act in 1974 in California, and there were about 2,800 Chinese American students who had limited English proficiency. The students claimed that they were not receiving any special help due to their inability to speak English. Only about 1,000 students received proper English instruction. The outcome of this was that the U.S. Supreme Court was on the side of the students. They said that these students should be treated with equality among the other students, and it guaranteed children an opportunity to a meaningful education regardless of their language background. The Bilingual Education Act. This was in 1968, and federal legislation that provided funding to school districts to develop bilingual education programs. It was the first federal legislation to address the unique educational needs of students with limited English-speaking ability. No Child Left Behind Act. This states that ESL students must meet the same academic content and achievement standards as other students. Title III states federal financial support is given to state and local educational agencies based on the number of limited English proficient students and immigrant youth. Standards and objectives are in place to ensure academic achievement. California's Proposition 227. This requires all public school instruction to be conducted in English. It places students not fluent in English in special state-funded English immersion programs for a limited time. Students will then be moved to regular classes. The formation of bilingual schools in Dade County, Florida. This was created in 1981 by a group of bilingual education instructors. They created COBIS, which is the Council of Bilingual Schools. They created COBIS because they wanted to help maintain standards that would serve to guide and improve the education of children, mainly those of Hispanic origin. There were 10 schools in Dade County that formed the original members of this council. This is a quote that I took directly from the website. They united to create an organization which would uphold the highest educational values of the Hispanic Americans who reside in this country. So basically, the people of Cobus wanted to ensure that while improving the students' English learning and living in this country, they overall wanted to make sure their students' cultural values were not lost along the way. Arizona's Proposition 203. This requires that all public school instruction be conducted in English. Children that are not fluent in English are placed in an extensive one-year English immersion program. They are placed in this extensive program to teach them the language as quickly as possible, while also learning other academic subjects in school. English is the language of the nation. Therefore, the government believes that the public schools of Arizona have an obligation to provide children with the skills they need to become valuable members of society, regardless of their ethnicity or national origins. Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1984. This was a revision of the Bilingual Education Act of 1968. It addressed the need for more flexibility of the implementation of programs for LEP students. LEP stands for Limited English Proficient. This gave local districts a greater voice in the decision process of how these students should be taught. Many grants were awarded for special programs. A couple grants that were awarded were the withdrawal of law remedies. They'd also provide for more flexibility for state and local districts. Grants awarded for several types of special programs for limited English proficient students. Founding of TESOL. TESOL stands for Teachers of English Speakers of Other Languages. This was established in 1966. It was created out of concern due to the lack of a professional organization bringing teachers and administrators at all educational levels together with an interest in the teaching of English speakers of other languages. 3 issues were the center of topic when creating this organization. The first issue was a need of a professional organization that was dedicated to the problems that are included in all levels of teaching English to speakers of other languages. The second issue was there was a need for a pedagogical journal to serve this profession. And the third issue was a need for a registry of specialists that would be helpful to government agencies and universities in their attempt to learn and research and aid in the growing need for qualified personnel in the area of English speakers of other languages. Historical evolution. In 1839, Ohio became the first state to adopt a bilingual education law, which approved German-English instruction. Louisiana passed an identical law for French and English in 1847. In 1850, New Mexico Territory did the same for Spanish and English. ESL students in Wisconsin. In 2012, 47,000 ESL students were served. Largest ESL population is Spanish students. The second largest population is Hmong students. 137 identified languages, and ESL students are registered in 80% of the 424 school districts in Wisconsin. How does the state deal with ESL students? They deal with ESL students. Step 1 would be home language survey. This is a required survey through Title I given to the parents of the ESL student to see what kind of language is spoken at home and to what degree. It is also used to see students' culture and academic background. Step 2 is the Access Test, or WAPT. The Access Test stands for Assessing Comprehension and Communication in English State to State. It was Wisconsin's initial English language screener. The WAPT score should be used to determine the placement for English language assessment and assist in determining the student's initial English language proficiency level. This test is taken once a year. The third step would be the access for ELLs. These test items are written from the WIDA's 5 English language proficiency standards and is taken once a year. Some of the categories are social and instructional language, language of language arts, language of mathematics, language of science, and language of social studies. The WKCE stands for Wisconsin Knowledge and Concept Exam. This Wisconsin Knowledge and Concepts examination is once a year, and it's an exam that students across the entire state take. The test is administered to see how well students understand material in particular school subjects, and the results help the DPI determine the performance of schools to see if they meet Title III. TESOL and WIDA. They are ESL standards for proficiency that assess reading, writing, listening, and speaking. The future of ESL instruction in Wisconsin. Bilingual schooling. This meaning teaching students both in their first language as well as English. These schools are normally separate from the mainstream public schools. Direct instruction. This is becoming more and more prevalent in school districts in Wisconsin. From our Brown Book, it states that the direct method is that second language learning should be more like first language learning. Lots of oral interaction, spontaneous use of the language, no translation between first and second languages, and little or no analysis of grammatical rules.